Hello and welcome to our scene on the Second New Deal, or the Second New Meal. The Second New Deal was a series of programs created after the end of many programs in the First New Deal. The focus was the same, recovery and reform during the Great Depression. If the first new meal wasn't enough for you, we've got another one waiting right here. I hope you're hungry. First, take a look at our table with the number 2 written on it. This is here to help you remember our scene anchor, a second new meal with its various guests. Next, let's take a look at our back wall. See the deer and hooves? If you think back to our scene from the first new meal, this deer is a recurring symbol of Franklin D. Roosevelt. The hooves below the deer should remind you that FDR beat Hoover in the election in 1932. Next, take a look at this fireplace. You got it, this fireplace is a recurring symbol for FDR's Fireside Chats. In these Fireside Chats, FDR used the radio to speak to millions of Americans during the Great Depression. Next, let's move left towards this bag of canes. IOU canes? Where have I seen that one before? That's right, this bag of canes is a recurring symbol for Keynesian economics. The reforms of the New Deal and the Second New Deal followed the principle of Keynesian economics, which encouraged deficit spending by the government in order to boost the economy. Deficit spending is basically another way of saying that the government was spending money borrowed from its future, richer self. These IOU canes should remind you of the deficit spending in Keynesian economics. Next, let's see who's at our dinner. Take a look at these 2 French security men chatting away in the back. Psst, pass me a baguette, mon ami. These French security guards are socializing, which should help you remember the Social Security Act. The Social Security Act created a pension plan that gave economic security to the elderly through regular payments of money. To help you remember that the Social Security Act created a pension plan, we've drawn pens in the hands of these men. It's also why we've drawn these security men with sharp, pin-like chins. Get it? Pin, chins, for pensions? Unfortunately, knowing that the Social Security Act was a pension plan was not enough. You also need to know that the idea for a pension plan came from a man named Francis Townsend. That's why these security guards are French, as France should remind you of the word Francis. And what does the envelope say? Send to town? Wait, doesn't that seem familiar? That's right, this envelope with the words send to town is a recurring symbol for the word Townsend. Together, these should help you remember the name Francis Townsend. Next, let's take a look at who came to dinner. Isn't that our friend, the construction worker Nero from our first New Deal? He's back again? He must have liked the food. Anyways, this construction worker is back because workers were a major winner in the Second New Deal. Check out the white pasta our worker is eating for dinner. This white pasta should help you remember the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration. The redesigned WPA of 1939 used $5 billion to create jobs. People were hired to build public works like highways and schools. The WPA spent a lot of money to create jobs, but not everybody was happy about this. Take a look at this book, for example, next to the white pasta. This book is a recurring symbol for boondoggling, with the man holding a WPA weapon on the cover. Opponents of the WPA called it boondoggling, which means spending money on jobs that are not needed. Next, take a look at this wagon of onions that our worker has brought to dinner. This wagon should remind you of the Wagner-Connery Act, also known as the Wagner Act. The Wagner Act gave workers the right to collectively bargain by joining groups called unions. We've drawn these onions in this wagon to represent unions. The Wagner Act allowed workers to form unions. Next, take a close look at our worker. Notice how he's holding a piece of coal and how he's brought a bag of coal to dinner? Who brings coal to dinner, by the way? Anyways, this coal should show you that the coal workers took advantage of the Wagner Act to form extremely powerful unions. You should know that a man named John Lewis was head of the United Mine Workers, a powerful union of coal miners that organized many successful strikes. This union of coal workers became one of FDR's greatest supporters. Moving left, take a look at our farmer, a recurring guest from our first new meal. This farmer should help you remember that farmers were a major winner in the Second New Deal. Next, take a close look at our farmer's falling plate. This farmer is at it again, sweeping his plate of hay, hay, hay to the floor. This falling hay, hay, hay should help you remember the second new AAA, or Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938. If you think back to our first new meal, you'll know that the Butler case in the Supreme Court found the first AAA to be unconstitutional. The second AAA brought back the policy of paying farmers to produce less crops, which you can remember by picturing our farmer wasting his plate of hay. The first and second New Deal created a lot of reforms and were credited with restoring optimism and employing over 5 million people during the Great Depression. Many of the programs of the New Deal are still around today, like the Social Security Administration or the Securities and Exchange Commission. But not everybody was perfectly happy with FDR's policies. For one, the first and second New Deal and its many programs made the government too big and too powerful. There were also many famous opponents of the New Deal, which you should know for your exams. Let's take a closer look. First, check out our dinner guest here. Notice how he's coughing out a bank bill? How did money get into my food? This coughing should help you remember the name Father Charles Coughlin. Coughlin was an influential radio priest who was an opponent of FDR and his New Deal policies. He wanted to nationalize the banks and provide free coinage of silver, which FDR refused. To remember that Coughlin wanted to nationalize the banks, just remember this man coughing out a bank bill. Next, take a close look at this long hoe in this farmer's hand. We've drawn this handle to make it extra long. This long hoe should help you remember the name Huey Long. Huey Long, also known as the Kingfish, was FDR's greatest opponent. Huey Long believed that the New Deal was not radical enough, and he thought FDR should have done even more to help the American people. So how did this New Deal end anyways? Take a close look at the bomb falling through the ceiling, about to destroy our dinner party. This bomb, about to destroy the new meal, should help you remember that the New Deal and the Great Depression were effectively ended by the start of World War II. And that's it for our second New Deal. Remember our French security guards to remember the names and ideas behind the Social Security Act. Picture a wagon of onions and the bag of coal near our worker to remember the Wagner Act and the coal unions. And think of our unhappy, coughing man with his long hoe to help you remember Charles Coughlin and Huey Long, the major opponents of the New Deal. Oh boy, I'm absolutely stuffed. With knowledge, I mean. I'll see you next time.